The Magewell Director Mini is an impressive little box that can live stream multiple cameras to multiple destinations and create picture-in-picture and other fancy layouts. It supports streaming to platforms like YouTube, but also has SRT and NDI inputs and outputs. But there are a couple of problems that could be deal breakers for you, so let's get right into it. Hi, I'm Aaron Parecki. I've tested nearly every multi-camera live streaming switcher out there and shared them with you on this channel. So I was super excited to get this Magewell Director Mini on loan from their US distributor mobilevideodevices.com to take a look at. So let's get into the pros and cons of the Director Mini. For the pros, I'm focusing specifically on things that are unique to the Director Mini compared to a lot of the other similar devices out there. First, let's start with some of the pros. This thing is super flexible. It has a sort of scene-based layout instead of direct camera switching. So you can see I've got a couple of cameras down here, but I also have things like video clips loaded in, or even externally connected webcams, or even an SRT source. But that's not all, because actually when you go and add a new source, you can create what they call a scene. When you add a camera, you don't just add the camera. You actually get to create a whole layout with it. So I can scale it down, put it in the middle, and then I can start adding other things on top or below. I can go ahead and add my channel art background, put that in the bottom layer, and now I have a quick little layout that I've created with the HDMI 2 input on top, scaled down on top of a colorful background. Scenes can be either a camera or input with a static background, or you can even create multiple cameras in a scene. So I can use HDMI 1, scale that down. Maybe I will also crop it to show just my face. We'll put that over there, and then on the side over in the rest of the space, we'll use HDMI 2. Scale that until it fits, and then go ahead and crop the side of it. And move it over. And now I've got a side-by-side layout, just like that. So that's what I mean by it's scene-based, where all of these scenes that you've created then show up as sources that you can switch to, as if they were a separate camera input. You may have already noticed that there are a lot of different options for bringing video sources into this. It's not just HDMI. So there are two HDMI ports on the side. There's also two USB ports that you can use for connecting webcams. I've tested this with the DJI Pocket 3 as well as the Insta360 Go 3 as webcams. But in addition to cameras that you can bring in, you can also bring in other sources like RTMP streams, SRT streams, a phone camera, or even NDI streams. So for example, I can use my phone as a wireless camera input into the Director Mini. I'll go create a new scene using a phone camera. I'll just call it camera 1. Just leave it full screen, save that. And now there's obviously no signal yet, but as I go and load up my phone, I'll open the Director Utility app on my phone, click phone camera, and because I'm on the same network that this is plugged into, it just shows up already as camera 1. So we'll go ahead and click connect. It's connecting, and now my phone's camera is mirrored into the Director Mini. So as I rotate my phone, you can see it just quickly rotates into landscape mode, and now I've got a little wireless camera over on the side here that's actually my phone streaming into the Director Mini. And of course, now that this is connected in, I can use this iPhone camera in any of the scenes that I've created. So I can go edit this scene. I can take out that camera, go ahead and add a new source that's my phone camera, scale that down, crop whatever you want to do, and now I've got that mixed in with the main feed from the main camera I'm talking to. But phone cameras are not the end of it. So for example, I've got the multi-view of my whole streaming setup here connected into an SRT encoder. So if I go ahead and bring in that SRT feed, you can see this is the multi-view of my ATEM that's doing this stream. There's a lot of really interesting things you can do with this once you have this set up. I'll get into some of those interesting use cases in a separate video. If you have NDI sources on your network, you can bring those in as well. That could be NDI app on your phone, or it could be NDI encoders of various sorts. So for example, I'll just load up the NDI HX camera app on my phone, and now this is broadcasting an NDI feed onto my network. Set that off to the side. And if I go create a new source, click NDI stream and search for NDI feeds, it'll find any NDI sources on the network. Like that. And again, this is my phone as a wireless camera into the Director Mini, this time over NDI. So as you can already see, there's a ton of different options for bringing video sources into the Director Mini to create layouts and mix and cut between angles. Now, what about outputs? There are actually multiple streaming output options available as well. If you go into the settings here, there's an encode button, and this will show you that you can actually create two different encoders encoding two separate things or at different frame rates or resolutions. So encoder 1 right now is set to the program feed at 1080, 30 frames a second, 6 megabits. I could set that to any one of the individual input sources or choose a different resolution or bitrate. I'm going to leave that one there. But if we go to encoder 2, we can also see that we could send, for example, a backup stream at a lower bitrate and lower resolution, or we could actually go and just send a totally different stream, like a dedicated feed for the HDMI input 2. Encoding source can be any of the inputs or webcams. You can choose the resolution, you can choose the frame rate, and you can also set your video bitrate. Once you have the two encoder sources set, you then get to decide what to do with them. So if we go back to here and choose this little streaming button, this will let us start any of these streams. The YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook ones are built in, but you can then create your own RTMP and SRT custom options. Again, back in the settings, we'll go to stream, and this is where you get to create your own server streams. So we're gonna go add a new server, choose SRT, for example, and when I'm creating this option, I get to choose which encoder it's using, whether I want to encode program 1 or encoder 1 or encoder 2. So one example of this, I could actually create two separate SRT feeds. Let's go back into the settings to do this. This SRT feed, we will make it encode encoder 1. It's going to go to one of my Magewell ProConverts in the studio. And then SRT 2, we're going to go ahead and make SRT feed that's going to encode encoder 2 to the other Magewell device. So we're going to go back into the encoder settings. We're going to make encoder 1 encode the HDMI input 1. Encoder 2 will actually do HDMI input 2. And now we are going to send two separate feeds to the two receivers in the studio. So now I can go ahead and start SRT caller. That's going to show up. You can see it in my little screen over here. We're going to start SRT caller 2, and that'll show up over there. So these are the two HDMI feeds being streamed directly into both ProConverts that you can see on the little side monitors over here. Now that those feeds are in my studio, I could of course switch to them as if they were local cameras, which is a really powerful workflow for doing all sorts of remote contribution things. Of course, another option you have is to use the two different encoders to stream to two different platforms. You could stream a HD version to YouTube and a 720 version to Facebook, for example, which is really handy because sometimes these platforms have different resolution requirements for what they can input. Another great feature that I'm a huge fan of is the fact that this device can be controlled remotely over the network. If you find the IP address, which you can do by pulling it down, and you'll see the IP address of either the Ethernet connection or the Wi-Fi connection. If you visit that IP address in your browser, you'll actually get a control interface that looks like this. This is the web interface after you log in, that you can see the status of the device as well as the network connections, shows you the CPU usage and all sorts of things. But what makes this really powerful is that there is actually a way to control the different scenes and switch between the different scenes that you've configured. Now, while you can't create scenes in the web interface, you do get to just toggle between what is showing on the main stream. You can choose between any of the scenes you've created, whether that's playing back video clips, playing back some of your layouts, or your custom scenes like that. And you get to just toggle what is live. There's also all of the graphics options. So if you've created graphics that you want to show on the stream, you can toggle those as well and bring those live. So as I'm clicking around, you'll see that it's actually bringing the graphics on air and doing the scene switching live as I'm clicking through in the web interface. So I'm not touching the Director Mini at all, but I'm able to toggle what is actually showing on the stream from the web interface. You can also choose which of your streaming connections are active. I can disconnect that SRT. I can start a YouTube one instead. You can start and stop recording on the SD card, and you get full access to the audio settings as well. Because this is a web interface, it's actually using the Magewell API on the device, which is a documented API, which means you can also control it from things like Companion. Normally when I'm doing a live stream, I have my Stream Deck here with all the buttons for switching between different camera angles or starting and stopping the show. I have this set up to control all sorts of different things in my studio. I have a separate video about that if you're curious. But because the Magewell Director Mini has an API, I can also create buttons in the Stream Deck that control scene switching and things like that on the Director. So as you can see, this is a super powerful device with a ton of interesting and unique features. But this wouldn't be complete without a couple of the cons. So let's talk about a couple of things that I am not a huge fan of in this. First, the size. Now, it is small, which is good because it's super portable, but it is actually pretty thick. It's about the size of a smartphone, but it's a lot thicker. And it gets even thicker once you add batteries. And that takes me to the second downside. There are no built-in batteries, which I guess you could think of as a pro actually, because you can always replace the batteries with fresh ones. You can have it be continuously powered by swapping out individual batteries. I can unplug one and it'll stay running on the other battery while I swap this one out. But that is also a con because this adds quite a lot of bulk to this. It's now a pretty thick device. The other downside on the power front is the AC adapter. It actually uses a 12-volt adapter, not USB-C. There is a USB-C output for getting video out of this, but there's no USB-C power option. So you do have to always carry your 12-volt power brick with it, plug it in that way if you aren't running it off of batteries. One other downside I noticed as I was testing this out is while you can stream to multiple SRT and RTMP, YouTube and all that at the same time, that is not the case with NDI. So if I have NDI output enabled, that's the only output that can be enabled. I can no longer record. It says NDI stream is going, you can't record. And I also can't enable an SRT stream. NDI kind of takes over the output and that's all it can do if you have NDI on. I'm not totally sure if this is a software limitation, a hardware limitation, or maybe it's actually a licensing limitation. It feels a little bit arbitrary to me because it's not that much different than encoding anything else. But that is one thing to keep in mind. If you're going to use the NDI output, that's the only output you get from this. But other than that, I've been super impressed with all the capabilities of this device. It can do an awful lot of things. It's got a lot of flexibility and you can really use it in a lot of interesting ways. So I hope this has been a useful sneak peek into the features of the Director Mini. I have other videos on this channel as well, going more in depth about specific features or doing even a full live demo of all the capabilities of the device. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. As always, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.